Hello everyone, welcome to this week's Market Outlook, review of what's been going on for the week so far and look ahead to next week. Hopefully the microphone is all working okay, the sound's all good at your end. If someone could confirm that. I think I'm on the third microphone in 3 weeks, I think, for these YouTube live streams. So if someone can just confirm that everything's okay, that'd be great. So as usual, how this works, we have a quick look at the major events that are due out for next week. Then I'll take a look at the markets, we'll take a look at the major markets, the indices, currencies, gold, silver, oil, been a pretty volatile week for oil, obviously. So we'll talk about that. And then if you have any questions or any markets you want looking at, if you put them in the chat, we'll go through them. And we'll be done after an hour. So we run an hour max on these. I think an hour is long enough. So I do these obviously with Capital.com. Let's do the risk warning. It's important to understand the presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones and Capital.com accept no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. Spread bets and CFDs are complex instruments and come with a high risk of losing money rapidly due to leverage. 71.2% of retail investor accounts lose money when spread betting and or trading CFDs with this provider. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets and CFDs work and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. We always do an offer on these days. The offer for today, if you're an existing client, you will have received the email. If you open an account today, you can trade zero spread on euro US dollar. It's an interesting market this week as well, the euro against the dollar. We are seeing a dollar comeback. We've talked about this a lot over recent weeks. We'll have a look at this again today, but that's the deal for today. No bid offer spread on euro US dollar. Okay, let's have a look at the important events for next week. Then we'll get into what's been happening this week. Tough week for me this week, I must admit. Wrong side of a lot of moves this week. I did I think a video on oil. Got stopped out on that trade. I did the same trade for my own account. Got stopped out on that. Done another trade that's still running. We'll talk about that. And is doing a bit better, but a pretty volatile week. But let's look at what's happening next week. Tuesday, 30th of March, Germany inflation data. Inflation, clearly a really hot topic at the moment. What's going on with inflation? Concerns are that inflation is going to start to rise end of the year. So there is, I think, some concern in markets about what that means for interest rates. The traditional way to combat inflation is to raise rates. So that has continued to spook markets. Next week, UK GDP. So how well or how badly is the UK economy going? EU inflation, again on Wednesday. And then Thursday, just ahead of the break for Easter, US manufacturing PMI. Okay, so that's due out next week as well. So let's recap what happened in markets. We've seen a volatile week again for stock markets. So surging bond yields have spooked investors again. We are seeing stock markets making a comeback, I think, over the last 24 hours. We'll take a look at that, but definitely under some pressure this week. Gold and silver under pressure, particularly silver. We'll take a look at the charts in a second. But as the US dollar strengthens, we've seen these markets under some pressure. We'll take a look at those. Not too much has changed from a week ago on gold. Fairly boring week, I think, but we'll take a look at the charts. Bitcoin, sell-off on Bitcoin towards 50K. I think it's bounced over the last 24 hours, but we'll take a look at what Bitcoin's been up to. Crude oil, lots of volatility in the price of crude. Interesting market to look at. I think it fell to its lowest levels since early February. We have had that tanker stuck in the Suez Canal. I'm sure you've seen the story. And it is blocking some crude oil tankers. So normally, in isolation, you'd expect that to lift the price of crude, or at least have a positive effect. on the crude oil price because of the threat to supply. But the lockdowns that we're seeing in Europe, the steps being taken in Europe, the slow vaccination rollout, all of this are offsetting, I think, any impact there. The concerns are, what impact is that going to have on demand for crude? I still think it's a buy, crude oil, but we'll have a look at that in a sec. And FX, we have seen a much weaker sterling, euro, a much stronger dollar yen over the last week. We'll take a look at all of those. And again, it's this US dollar strength in those. So we'll take a look and see what that means. That's it. Let's jump onto the platform. So as usual, I'm using the Capital.com trading platform. If you don't subscribe to us on YouTube, you're watching on YouTube now. If you could subscribe, that'd be great. We do regular videos throughout the week on different markets. I think we did oil, gold miners, and fundamental analysis over the last week. And we'll do other videos again next week. If you're subscribed, that'd be great to help support the channel. Right, I thought we'd start off. We'll do our little tour of all the markets, but I thought we'd start off with the US dollar. I've talked about this market a lot. I think it's a market that we should all be watching during the week. Keep an eye on it, whatever markets you trade. It's the dollar index. So the code is DXY. It's the dollar against a basket of different currencies. The largest weighting in the basket is the euro, but the pound, the yen, the Canadian dollar, Swiss franc, some others as well are in there. But it's the price action this year that for me has made this an interesting market. We saw the dollar index spike at 104 in March of last year. Coronavirus pandemic really spreads. Everyone's looking for a safe haven. The dollar rallies. And since then, of course, investors have embraced risk once more. So we've seen the dollar lose ground until really the last couple of months. And I think what's interesting for me in the dollar index, look where it sells off to. It sells off to the lows from around 2018, those lows. That sort of area there, 88 to 89, was a major turning point for the dollar index in 2018. We've come back to it in early 2021, and we have seen a turnaround. So this is what's putting pressure on the likes of the pound, the euro, and gold as well. And just yesterday, we saw it bounce back or bounce to its best levels, the dollar index, since November of last year. So we saw a 4-month high for the US dollar. And I think this is a really interesting market to continue to watch. I've said it before, do we think that 2021 ends up being the year of a great comeback for the US dollar? So far, it's been making a fairly modest comeback, but I think it's a really interesting market to watch, and it's clearly putting a lot of pressure on other markets as well. But let's look at oil. Let's take a look at the price of crude oil. Really choppy week, as you can see. If we stick with the daily candles for now, look at these swings. So this was the 23rd, so that was Tuesday. The market goes from 61 down towards 57, big sell-off. Wednesday, market goes from 61 to 57 the other way. Yesterday, market goes from almost 61 down to 57.40. And today, we've gone from 58.60 to just above 61 earlier on today. Loads of volatility, but no real change, from where we were perhaps a week ago. I do think it's interesting down here. I've picked up here on the trend in crude since November. Those November lows are down at 34, and clearly into early March, the price has doubled pretty much. And we were looking at this fall through the trend last week, and I was saying, well, I always want to give it, if a market falls through a trend line, it doesn't necessarily mean the trend is over. I always want to give it a second chance. And we've blipped below those lows. Those lows last week were 58.28. The market traded 57.20 this week. So we moved $1 below those lows, but it's sort of fighting to make a comeback. So for me, the trade in oil, I'm long. I bought it in the video this week. We ended up getting stopped out. I did the same trade for myself. I got stopped out on that. I did another trade yesterday on oil, being a buyer, and that's performing a bit better. And it was really the trade for me yesterday. I think was an obvious one to do. If you were bullish on oil, the market yesterday afternoon. So around about this time yesterday, pretty much, got knocked back to 58. We saw some strength coming back in. I think from a risk-reward point of view, it looked like an interesting trade with stops below the low from a couple of days earlier, the other side of 57. So it's been a good trade so far after getting initially stopped out in this move here. So for me, going into next week for oil, clearly I think it's going to be one to watch. If it can crack 62, it looks like we've got a head and shoulders or a double bottom or whatever chart pattern you want to call it. I think we could see a lot of volatility going into next week for oil. But for me, I must admit, my target is for a run back to 66 as a minimum for oil from here. What would change my mind and turn me bearish finally on oil would be if it fell below this week's low, $57. Yes, we will cover gold and silver. Don't worry, we're going to come to those in a sec. So for me, I'm still bullish. You know, we've been knocked back. We've only been knocked back to where it was about 5 weeks ago. The lows, you can see these lows in Feb, can't you, for oil? So we've been knocked back to there. But overall, for me, if we go back, take that trend right back on oil to the April lows last year, yeah, that's right. That big trend is still up. I saw there was a comment this week on one of the videos, why do you always buy oil? And because it just goes up. That's why, you know, apart from the last few weeks or so where we've seen it knock back, you know, it had been a good market this year, and the videos we did various trades on the way up. Bit messy this week, but I do wonder if we see the trend in oil recover next week. Let's see. But really interesting market to watch, I think, going into next week. Let's look at stocks, shall we? Let's take a look at stock markets. Let's start off with the S&P 500, so the broader US stock market. And as I say, you know, quite a bit of volatility this week continuing. Let's have a look at the S&P. So, you know, the all-time high for the S&P was in on the 18th of March. So we are only a week and a day away from that being set. But since then, you know, we had seen plenty of volatility this week. Quite the turnaround yesterday. You know, for those of you who are fans of candlestick charts, I suppose we could call that the blue one against the red, an engulfing candle yesterday, bullish engulfing. No, it's not perfect because the body's quite small, but either way, clearly a turnaround in sentiment today, and markets have been open for just over an hour in the US and making a strong start. So for me, on stock markets, we go back to those March lows last year, just over a year ago now, but that trend is up. Yeah, I mean, clearly it has struggled a bit perhaps in the last month or so, but we have seen an all-time high in the last week or so. So for me, I'd still be a buyer on dips in stock markets. We've got very good short-term support, short-term, from yesterday. The lows yesterday on the S&P at about 38.50. We've got really big support back here from late Jan, 36.90 to 37.20 March. So for me, we've got this whole area of pretty good support for the S&P. So for me, it's only if it breaks below these levels do I want to start getting bearish. You know, I still want to be trading with this trend, and despite the volatility this week, I still want to be a buyer on dips for the S&P. I'm just going to jump to a question someone's put in. What's your reason behind using a 10-day RSI over the default 14-day RSI? Very good question. 14-day RSI, as you're right, is one of the default levels or default values for the RSI. For me, because I'm not a massive fan of indicators anyway, you know, I do put them on to have a feel for like overbought, oversold. But for me, 14 days always seemed a little bit arbitrary, to be honest. Whereas 10 days, to me anyway, makes sense because it's 2 weeks. It's 2 trading weeks, isn't it? So that's why I use a 10-day RSI rather than a 14-day RSI. But I don't think there's any right or wrong here. But it's just one I've used for many years now. Okay, how do I? Quick another question. How do you know the big support levels? Well, we just look where sentiment changed. You know, support is not some sort of magic number or magic phenomenon. It's where we saw big turnarounds. You know, you can see. Look at this. You know, big turnaround in late Jan for the S&P. The market gets knocked back to 36.60. and then rallies out to fresh all-time highs. So clearly, that's big support, or for me, in my book, that's big support. So it's looking to see where sentiment changed. Let's take a look at the NASDAQ, then we'll have a look at some of the European stock markets. NASDAQ 100, struggling, compared to the S&P. We last saw all-time highs in the NASDAQ just over a month ago now, back the 16th of Feb. It got knocked back. I don't know where I've drawn that trend line there. I think I was picking up off these lows here, June lows. Got knocked back to that trend I picked up on from June. Faffed around with the trend line. We've come back to it again this week. So again, for me, trend is still up in the NASDAQ. It has lagged behind the S&P over the last few weeks because, again, I think a feeling that perhaps some of these tech stocks, the likes of Tesla, some of the stay-at-home stocks, Zoom, Netflix, those sort of things, had maybe got a bit ahead of themselves. But I'd still be a buyer. So it's interesting we're seeing, strong start today. Levels to watch on the NASDAQ going into next week. I think the lows from early March, 12,200. If that broke, I think I'd probably think about changing my stance as to where we are with the trend, and perhaps there is a real risk of this trend ending. But for me, I've been looking for a bounce from here on the NASDAQ. Let's see what happens. Let's take a look at the DAX. The DAX has been really surprising. The German stock market, the DAX. Let's pick that one up. DAX 30, here we go. So as we're doing today's session, let's get rid of that, we are almost at fresh all-time highs on the DAX. Lots of volatility this week. I think they're all-time highs, aren't they? Or multi-year highs at the very least. But anyway, the last all-time high we saw was the 18th of March, so just over a week ago. Market hit 14,810. And at the moment, the market today is traded to 14,785. So we've come within 25 points of that all-time high. So a really, really volatile week on the DAX. If you take this out, look at that. I mean, yesterday, the market traded as low as 14.4. And here we are nearly at 14.8. So we've seen a good 350-point range just over the last 24 hours in the DAX. So interesting market. What can I say? Trend is still up. I don't think it's a clearer trend as we have on the S&P, for example, at the moment, but a definite uptrend. Big breakout this year on the DAX, breaking out through these highs that have been in place since pretty much 2018. So big break on the DAX. So for me, looking to see if the DAX moves higher from here. Let's see what happens. And the Japan, the Nikkei, I think I've mentioned, I've got a couple of trades running on the Nikkei anyway. And under a bit of pressure this week, the Nikkei, but again, bouncing back the last couple of days. So again, falling out of that trend line, that sharper trend line that's been in place since November. But as I say, I don't take the first break of a trend line as the sign the trend is ending. What's interesting for me, slips down on the break of the trend line, March the 5th, to about 28,300 pretty much. Yesterday came down to 28,275 and we've bounced. So for me, it's an interesting setup here that this old support has held. Personally, I'd be looking for a run back up to the highs, the recent highs at 30,700. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with the DAX up at these levels. See if it can, not the DAX, the Nikkei, sorry. See if we can continue that trend that's been going on. I think I'm just watching the stream. Oh, yeah, it seems to be okay. I thought there was a bit of lag on the stream. So that's stock market indices. So pretty volatile week of stock markets, but hasn't changed the trend. Oh, FTSE, sorry, I forgot. Got the UK, FTSE 100 index. Again, pretty much following the same path as everything else. Bit of volatility, but you can see we've got a little bit of a trend going on in the FTSE since the end of January anyway. Big support at 62.50 that's held in November, held in late November, held again in Jan. So as usual, the FTSE is a bit boring compared to everything else, but broadly speaking, still up. 6,800 short-term target. If we get a break of there, be looking for 7,000 next. So the FTSE, as with others, looks to be a buy the dips market. Let's take a look at gold and silver. Gold is boring. I know I say this every week. Boring market. at the moment. Trend is still down. The intermediate trend since the August highs. But look at how relatively low the volatility has been. These are daily candles that we're looking at here. Really low volatility. So it was a week ago. When we were doing this a week ago, the price was about 1740, and it's 1730 today. Gold. Big trend still down. The trend since August still down. The really big trend, if we go back to the August 20, let's get the RSI off. August 2018 lows. That trend still up there, off those lows, still going. Trend line support coming in around 1535. I think what's interesting, if you really wanted to be a buyer of gold, how important these levels were. 1660 back in April, 21st of April, beginning of May, and again in June. 1660 was a real turning point for gold last year on the way up, or was support for gold on the way up. So I suppose if you really wanted to be a buyer down here, the closest I'd want my stop is the other side of these lows. But I think, if gold does turn around, I think there'll be plenty of time to get on board any recovery. Let's see what happens. But fairly boring week for gold. It's not too interesting for me at the moment, that one. And silver has come under some pressure. Price of silver. It's a bit messy, silver, isn't it? I must admit, I find it's been a really scrappy 8 months or so, I think, in silver. We had not the all-time highs, 7-year highs, I think they were, in the summer last year, up nearly at 30. Pretty sideways then. Bit of a run up in early Feb on rumour, expectation, whatever, that perhaps the silver ETF would be the next Wall Street Bets Reddit target. Bit of excitement there. And then just plot back into the range since then. It has fallen out of this trend line over the last week. So perhaps we need to think about getting rid of that. I'm still bullish on silver, still mildly bullish silver. We've got support at 24. It's bigger support down at 2170. I think if 2170 gets lost, then we have to think about a much deeper sell-off for silver. It's just boring. I say it every week and it continues to be boring. I suppose the trade here would be, for me, to be a buyer of silver with a stop underneath the lows from mid-Jan, about $24 on silver. But it wouldn't surprise me if we came back to it in a week's time and it was trading pretty much where it is now. Famous last words. So pretty dull, I think, at the moment, the price of silver. Let's have a look at Bitcoin. So again, the usual disclaimer or whatever it is. I can't trade Bitcoin through Capital because I'm a UK resident and I'm trading on the FCA regulated platform. I've got it in here because I've saved it as a chart before. But if you're in the UK, it's the FCA outlawed trading Bitcoin on spread bets or CFDs. So that's why I can't actually click buy or sell here, even though the buttons are showing there. But we've got going back to October last year, big trend for Bitcoin, clearly up. It did hit all-time highs this month, traded up to 61,700. It sold off, but in the great scheme of things, it's not that dramatic a sell-off, I don't think. We've got big support coming in at 32. I think if it lost the lows from late Feb at 43,000, we'd see a deeper sell-off. But for me, if I was trading Bitcoin, I'd be looking to buy the dips still. Let's flip this over to an hourly chart. If we look at it sort of there, we're looking broadly sideways, I suppose, over the last month or so in Bitcoin. I wouldn't necessarily be in a hurry to buy at the moment, but that big trend is still up. So for me, I'd still be looking to be a buyer of Bitcoin, but perhaps not today. Maybe wait and see if it goes next week. I suppose an aggressive trade, if you really wanted to buy it today, would be a buyer now with a stop under yesterday's low. Yesterday's low was 50,400 on Bitcoin. That could be a trade, but broadly speaking, the big trend is up. All-time highs this month. Still looks bullish. No market moves in a straight line forever. All the usual stuff. So perhaps we'll see it build a base over the next few days or so, and at some point push out to fresh all-time highs again. Oh, let's talk about natural gas quick. I did a trade on natural gas this week, actually. It's one that we don't cover normally because there's not much interest. But actually, people on the chat normally want to have a look at natural gas. I bought back in this week natural gas. Really interesting market, I think. We had a multi-year decline in natural gas. Ended last year, great run last year, caught some of it on the way up from about 1.7 up to 3.4. So natural gas doubled from July into November. Sold off, and I thought, we're off again. So I ended up buying back here, and it sold off again. So I bought in this week, really, thinking this correction in natural gas is over. I bought in, I think it's about only a couple of cents below where it is now. But really looking to see these old levels hold from 218 to 230 and looking for a push back up to 3 in the short to medium term. We've done crude oil. So we did crude oil was the first market we looked at. Someone's asking for crude oil. Once this is over, there will be a recording available so you can watch the recording. So I think natural gas is interesting. That is it, building, has it built a base again here? And are we going to have a push up to 3? Let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's take a look at the currencies now. Pound against dollar, euro dollar. We started things off by looking at the dollar index, and the dollar index has caused, quite a bit of grief this week because of its strength. It's put pressure on the euro and the pound. So let's take a look at those markets. Let's have a look now. So let's take a look at the pound first of all. Big sell-off in the pound over the last month or so. We did have this trend that I've been following in the pound off the lows. These were 35-year plus lows. That trend was doing a good job. I suppose, actually, the move over the last couple of days, you can say, that's the return to the trend line. Bit of a blip below it, but you can see how quickly it's moved away. So I think that's an interesting setup for next week. If you're a fan of the RSI, as me with my 10-day RSI, this is the most oversold the RSI has been since September last year. So that does add weight to an argument to be a buyer. If you wanted to be a buyer down here, I think there are logical places for stops. Perhaps this is a trade we do. Always do a trade on these. Let's do a trade on the pound. So for me, the logical place at the moment for stops, based on the daily chart, I think that the closest I'd want my stop is yesterday's low. Yesterday's low was 36.70. The market's 37.90. I might give it a bit more wiggle room and go the other side of here. 35.65 was the low back in the 4th of Feb. And really, if this trend is going to continue, I'll be looking for a 500-point move from here back up to those old highs. Let's see. But I think it's interesting. I think it is interesting down here. We're in sort of bounce or bust territory for the pound. Let's set this up. Let's do the trade. So we normally risk £100 on these trades. I'm going to go 135.50 as a stop. 1.3550. Close at a loss. How many am I going to buy? I'm going to buy about 6,000, I think. Yeah, buy 6,000. Where it's trading now. Stop at 135.50. Risk is 102. Let's buy it. There we go. So I bought at 137.86. Let's see how that turns out over the next week. But I think it's interesting because it's come back to the trend. Euro US dollar. Euro dollar really weak. We saw then the pound has turned around over the last week. Over the last couple of days, sorry. Euro still. I've been surprised by this euro weakness. I think the waves of the lockdowns that we're seeing in Europe clearly, I think putting some pressure on the euro there. I thought we were going to get a euro bounce. We're not getting it. So the euro, arguably, that trend from the March lows in euro US dollar is still up. We've got some interesting levels coming up. Your trend line support 116.50. The old lows at 116 from September. So again, looking for it to bounce, we do have what's known as bearish divergence on the RSI. I've talked about this on some of the videos we do on the channel. It can be a pretty strong signal where the market, euro dollar in this example, slips to a low, slips lower still. The RSI has made a higher low. So the RSI is diverging from what the price is doing. So I think it is an interesting one down at these levels, but still looks weak. But we've got loads of support coming in. if I would say, I would be expecting a euro bounce from here. It's just not happening yet. But I do think it's an interesting market to watch going into next week. We do have euro inflation due out next week as well. So it could be a really interesting market, but still a bit weak today as the week is ending. Let's see what happens. So there's our usual list of markets. I'm going to jump into the questions now and have a look at some of the markets that people are asking about. So what to watch next week? Crude oil, I think, because we've seen lots of volatility this week. $57 has held. I think we will see a recovery in crude oil from here. Let's see what happens. The dollar index, we've seen the dollar put pressure on gold, silver, pound, euro over recent weeks. It's trading at its best level since November. So the dollar index is an interesting one, I think, going into next week. Gold and silver are still boring, I think, in my opinion. And stock market's pretty volatile, but be interesting to see if we see a strong finish today and do we see some more momentum next week. Let's see what happens. Right, let's jump into some of the questions. I will try and cover whatever markets I can. I did see somebody mention helium. I didn't even know you could trade helium, and we don't list it, so I don't think it's a mainstream. Well, it's not a mainstream market. It's not one we cover. So unfortunately, I can't have a look at that. Someone mentioned. What did they mention? Someone mentioned the other Ethereum. That's it, isn't it? I've just got to log into a different platform here because I can't show Ethereum on this platform, on my platform, because it's UK. So I've logged into one that Capital provide me with to look at some of these markets that we can't trade on leverage in the UK. So there's Ethereum, pretty similar to Bitcoin, isn't it? I mean, we saw, we had all-time high. Is it all-time highs? Yeah, all-time highs for Ethereum, Feb the 20th, up above 2,000. Sells off to 1,300. Fails, doesn't make all-time highs again in March. But for me, I mean, the trend, depending on what trend you're looking at in Ethereum, if we go back to the March lows when it was $100, $110 or so, that trend is up, clearly accelerates away and has lost that trend. But for me, it's still bullish, but we've gone somewhat sideways over the last month or so. If you were buying it now, I suppose if you're a short-term trader, you might be a buyer now with stops under the lows from a couple of days ago, under the lows of 1540, perhaps more conservative stops, the other side of 1300. I think if you wanted to be patient, we'd wait to see if it sells off from here, But I think it's interesting, that clearly the trend is still up. It just hasn't made an all-time high for a month. And I think perhaps those who are new to trading, not that I'm saying this is the case for you who asked the question, but I think a lot of people who are new to trading have started trading cryptos and get used to markets blasting away. And as we all know, that's not a normality for most markets. So maybe we have a period of time where some of these cryptos go sideways. I don't know. But given the gains we've seen in the last few months, it would maybe be a bit optimistic to expect those sort of crazy gains again. So maybe we do have just some sideways trading in the cryptos from here. Right, IAG. IAG is the airlines group, isn't it? International Airlines Group, owner of BA, I think, amongst others. I think I've messed something up now by flipping. I have to log out and log back in again. I think it still thinks I'm logged back into the other one. Hold on a sec. Let me just log out and come back in because I think I had two platforms open. It got a bit confused. Here we go. Let's bring that one back over. So IAG. What do you think? I think on the dailies, a bit of I wonder what that was to do. I'm guessing it's to do with lockdowns and everything else, isn't it? March the 19th, it closes at 207, opens down here, 177, but trades up. I wouldn't buy it because of me as a trend follower, blah, 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 blah. It's pretty obvious which way the trend has been. But as a recovery play, of course, all of these airline stocks, and I saw someone mentioned Carnival, cruise lines. We'll have a look at those in a sec. I suppose if we were looking at the shorter term trend in IAG from the November lows, there's an argument to be a buyer. I think an aggressive trade here, an aggressive trading idea. We saw it gap lower on some news. I'm guessing some lockdown news earlier this week. Be a buyer at 194 with a stop the other side of this low. That low was 177. So I think that's an interesting one. That recovery trend is still going. Clearly pretty volatile ones to be in at the moment because of what's going on in the world, as we all know. But I'd be looking to see if it can regain those old highs from just a couple of weeks ago, up at 220. So quite an aggressive one in there if you really wanted to, but an interesting one. Right, let's see, what else have we got? Silver, we looked at silver, looked at IIG. Dollar, Turkish lira. Yeah, we looked at that. I did a video on fundamentals this week, and one of the things we looked at was the dollar, Turkish lira, because it changed. You can see that the move here, if I move this along, so dollar, Turkish lira, until about a week ago, looked like that. So this time last week, we'd seen weakness. This is dollar weakness against the Turkish lira. Excuse me, dollar strength. So we did look like a buy, but then over the weekend, the head of the central bank in Turkey was fired. So we saw dollar lira go from 7.15 up to 8.30. So we saw a 15% jump in the US dollar versus the lira on the firing of the guy who runs the central bank. I think it's difficult to trade it. If you look at a really long-term chart, we've only got a few years here, going back to 2017. So 3.5-year chart on dollar, Turkish lira. The trend for the dollar is up. So we've seen continued Turkish lira weakness over the years. What do you do? I think it's quite hard to trade these sort of gaps, these sort of events. But I suppose, and again, an aggressive trade. If you want to be a buyer of the dollar here, a stop underneath the low from a few days ago, which was, what was it? 768. That's supposed to be one. But I do find, quite difficult to trade when markets are as volatile as that. What's going on with Discovery C? What is Discovery C? Let's have a look. Discovery C. Don't know. What do they do? Wow, that's getting hammered. Discovery Communications operates as a media company. Yeah, interesting. I don't know. What is happening with those? So I'm going to have a quick Google for the news. What is happening with that one? Then I can't see anything. Let's have a look at the chart. I mean, that's been absolutely slammed, hasn't it? Off the highs. Great trend up to $66. So ran from December 23 up to 66. Absolutely slammed since then. It's not a Reddit stock, is it? It's not one of those. I don't think it is it? Because it looks far too smooth, the movement's up. I don't know. I really don't know what the breaking news is about that one. I mean, for me, that would be a wait and see one, to be honest. I mean, clearly, it's been hammered over the last week. I'll be waiting to see what happens down here and see. Oh, hang on, someone's spamming the chat. Hold on a second. Just get rid of him. There we go. Put user in timeout. For me, I'll be waiting to see what happens and see if we get some stability. I'm not quite sure what the news is there on that one, but great trend on the way up. And hopefully, if someone was in it, you'd be out on some sort of trailing stop loss on the way down. Let's see what happens. Let's catch up with some of the others. Euro dollar, we looked at that. Turkish lira, we looked at that. Is your platform trading view? No, it's Capital.com. The giveaway is the top left up there. So it's Capital.com is the trading platform I'm using here. So obviously go to their website to find out all about them, download the app, everything else. Let's have a look at Carnival, someone said, Carnival. So the cruise line. Oh, why isn't that coming up? I'm surprised surprised we don't have that. I wonder if it's something on my account is the reason we don't have that. Let me see if I can, because I'd be interested in taking a look at that. Let me have a look at it somewhere else. Just hold on a second. Because again, as with IAG, the airline, it'd be quite interesting to see how that's doing at the moment. Here we go. So let's have a look. Here we go. Let's just bring it up on that one. So it's third-party software. So I suppose it's similar to AIG in a way that we've got, we've got the recovery going on. Not surprisingly, absolutely hit last year. Carnival share price. This is the London Stock Exchange listing. Went from £37 down to £6. And again, we're seeing a recovery. So I suppose if you thought we're going to see a recovery back to normal for some of these leisure stocks, it's an interesting trend to follow here. It'd be interesting to see if it's sold off back towards the lows from early Jan or late Jan, around £11. Little recovery trend going on, so perhaps we'll see more recovery for Carnival. Let's leave that. Let's get that one off there. Sugar, sugar's got really hit this week, hasn't it? So it's been a good trade of mine in the past. It is interesting, I think, but it's got really hit actually this month. So we've got a really interesting trend in sugar from the April lows last year. So coming in from April the 28th lows, down around 0.09, traded up to 19. Why are people's language is terrible in this chat. Hang on, let me just get rid of this person. Hang on a second. There we go. I think it's interesting that the price comes from the highs around about 19, 23rd of February, back to where we are now. And this is the trend. Okay, so I think it's a really interesting market to watch going into next week. You probably know from previous live streams we've done that I'm a big fan of commodities. We've seen some great trends in cotton. Sugar is a great example. Cocoa has its moments now and again. So for me, sugar is a really interesting one going into next week, and I might be a buyer next week. If we saw a bit of strength off that trend line, we've got good support theoretically from mid-Jan coming in around 15 and see what happens. But sugar, one to watch, I think, for next week in that market. Alcoa, big US stock, Alcoa. Here we go. What are they? Are they metals or something? Aluminium, that's it. The clue's in the name. Aluminium Company of America. So world's largest producer of aluminum, as they'd say over there. I think it's interesting. I always have a problem with stocks like this, where you think, well, what do you do here? The trend is up. If we picked up on the trend off the lows, down here. Great trend, blah, blah, blah. Just a little bit sideways over the last, month or so. So what I would do, personally, if I was watching that one, I wouldn't do anything yet. If it broke through the highs, $33.40 are the highs. If it broke through the highs, I'd be a buyer. If it broke through there. So let's say I put a buy order in at 34. And I'd wait to see if it sells off. Does it sell off back more to the trend? And perhaps be a buyer there. But at the moment, I'd be sitting on my hands. The trend is definitely up. It's just, well, which way is the next major move going to go? Are we going to see it break out and then start to take off again? Or are we going to see a bit of cooling off? And for me, I'd rather sit on my hands and wait and see what happens next from there, personally. Right, let's go back into the chat. Discovery, we looked at those. Saw silver, 8031 TYO. I've got absolutely no idea what that is. 8031 TYO. Is it Mitsui? Is that the chart you mean? Mitsui and Co. Yeah, the ticker is 8031, so I'm guessing that's the one. Let's have a look at Mitsui. Again, we don't have that much data here. We've only got data going back to the summer of last year. But for me, as a trend follower, the trend is definitely up. Looking something like that. Again, I suppose the question is, are you a buyer now at 23.76? I'm guessing that's yen, isn't it? I'm guessing this is a Japanese listing. you're buying out, or do you wait to see if it breaks out? Personally, I would be thinking about, where do I buy? Where does my stop go? Personally, my stop would go the other side, the closest I want my stop, I should say, the other side of the 5th of March lows, 22.35, but the trend is still up. So yeah, I think that's an interesting one. Next one, let's have a look at the next one. What are your thoughts on moving a stop loss to the opening price to get a free trade? Do you think it makes you more complacent? It's a really good question. That I'll tell you, and I've got not the perfect answer, but I do have an answer. I think that, broadly speaking, people are too keen to move their stop loss to break even, because psychologically it's nice, isn't it? Because you think, well, I've got free trade effectively, yeah. But I think quite often in trading, the thing that feels comfortable to do is the wrong thing to do. Let's take oil as an example, right? So let's say I bought oil yesterday at $59. Let's make the maths easy. So I bought oil at 59 yesterday, and I put a stop at 57. So I've got a $2 stop on oil. I bought at 59. The market goes to 59.50. So I'm 50 cents in profit. My stop is still at 57. I move my stop to 59. Okay, so I've got, as you say, free trade. A bit of volatility, I get stopped out. I get stopped out at 59. To me, it doesn't make sense, because when you first put the trade on, you bought at 59 with a stop at 57. You had 200-point risk. The market moves 50 points in your favour. You move your stop to break even straight away. I think that's you're going to end up with a load of trades getting stopped at break even and some losing trades. It doesn't make sense. So for me, the rule for moving my stop to break even, in that oil example, if I'm a buyer at 59 with a stop at 57, the market has to move at least the distance of the stop in my favour. Then I move the stop to break even. I think if you're too quick to move the stop to break even, you can end up just getting stopped out of break even all the time. So for me, it has to move into profit the distance my stop was away. So I hope that makes sense for when it comes to moving stops. Like I say, it's not perfect, but for me it works enough of the time to be part of a profitable system with clearly other things in there as well. Right, we need to crude oil. We did that. Facebook shares. Let's take a look at those. How are we doing for time? Well, we've got 10 minutes or so left. Facebook. Let's bring the chart up for Facebook. Oh, it's a bit boring, isn't it? We did do a trade. I remember doing a trade on these. Have we still got the trade running? We do. We did a trade in the live stream on the 15th of Jan. We did a trade on Facebook, buying them at 252 when they were down here. That was it. 15th. Yeah, here it would have been. They're just really sideways, aren't they? I probably should have sold out a couple of days ago, to be honest. They're just a bit sideways, Facebook, as you can see, since August last year. So I think, broadly speaking, the big trend is up, but they're just a bit dull and sideways at the moment. So nothing too exciting, I don't think, in Facebook at the moment. John Menzies. Oh, that's one we don't get very often. Do we list it? Do we cover John Menzies? I don't think we do. Maybe it's too small. Is it called Menzies? No, so we don't cover that one. It's too small. We don't do CFDs and spread bets on everything, because if they've got too small a market cap, we take them off. LSE, we don't include them, sorry. LSE, London Stock Exchange shares. This has been a great performer. I'm not quite sure why the move in the LSE. I don't know if they paid a special dividend or something. It seemed, I saw this chart the other week, and I wasn't sure what was going on here. If this was an actual fall, a real fall, perhaps if you follow it, you'll know. But I'm not sure what happened here with the big fall. But over the years, LSE is the London Stock Exchange share price. So clearly the exchange is actually listed on the exchange, if that makes sense. The big trend is up. I'd be sort of waiting to see. I think this is a buying opportunity. So I'll be waiting to see. But at the moment, it isn't forming a base, is it? It's still going down. So I think it's interesting one to keep coming back to. It was 100 quid a share, 16th of Feb. Clearly, it's dropped since then. Dropped a lot since then. But let's see what happens. The big trend is up. Let's keep coming back to it and see what it looks like. What time frame you use for trailing stops? For me, it's price. Trailing stops is price. So I do all of my analysis on the stuff I trade on daily charts. We do, like we do in the videos, really. Just look on the daily charts, decide the stop loss off the daily charts, and then trail them. As I said, that explanation. If my stop is 200 points away, the market's got to move 200 points in my favour. Then I move the stop up. Fibonacci retracements. I think Fibonacci retracements absolute rubbish. Never use them. But good luck if you do and you make money. Making money is the name of the game. But I don't believe in Fibonacci personally. So I don't look at those. Cotton. Let's have a look at cotton. The price of cotton. So another commodity. It's like a bit like that sugar chart we looked at. We had some great trends in some of these agricultural commodities up until Feb. And again, you can see in cotton, why to me it's an interesting market again going into next week because we're back to that trend. So I think cotton for me pretty oversold down here as well. This is the most oversold the market's been since April last year. So it's been 11 months, nearly a year since cotton was this oversold on a 10-day RSI. Let's see what happens next week in cotton. But for me, I don't think I've got a trade in cotton at the moment. But I might be interested to be a buyer next week. Maybe let's come back to it in next week's live stream and see how it's doing. Gold, we do gold. Can you weigh the use of fundamental analysis versus technical analysis in your trading? Yes, zero fundamental analysis. So I take an interest, I think like most people, what's going on in the world, like the Euro's weak, I think, because of the lockdowns, the fundamentals of lockdowns and the slow vaccine rollout. Oil's weak because of that, because of the effect it might have on the global economy. But I trade purely technical. So purely, off the charts, off the levels, all of that. So I don't use any fundamentals in my trading. Can we have a look at TAN? Sure. What's TAN? What is it? I don't think we've got it actually. I don't know what it is. Volkswagen. Yeah, Volkswagen had massive moves, didn't it? The other week. Great uptrend. Again, I think it's always difficult, isn't it? We've seen a great uptrend off those March lows last year, down around 79, 80 euros. Currently, it touched 240 the other week, so it trebled. I always have a problem I always find it much easier like this to go back into history when we're sort of pretty close to the trend and it's all looking fairly sensible. And when it takes off like that, I always have a bit of a problem. So the trend is up. It's just where does it go from here? Does it? I'd be happier if it sold off a bit back towards that 12-month trend line. But the trend is undeniably up. It's just whether we're due a period of cooling off really from here. Do you analyse forex pair? Yeah, we did pound against the dollar and euro against the dollar. What's the best trading day of the week? Good question. I don't think there is one. I'm sure I saw an email this week, or I saw, maybe it was a YouTube video, a bit of a clickbait, learn what the best trading day of the week is. I think it's absolutely rubbish. I think, because clearly, you have volatility and stuff can come in waves. You have days where it's boring and days that it's exciting, and it's not the same day every week. So personally, I don't think there is a best trading day of the week. I suppose if you had to absolutely pick one day, you could say Friday, because it's the end of the week and you can get to see everything that's happened and where markets are finishing ahead of the weekend. So perhaps that's a more definite finish, but I really don't think there is a good trading day of the week. The platform is Capital.com. What I'll do, let me give you the contact details for me and them. So go to Capital.com to find out more about the platform. You can download the app, you can start trading, all of that sort of stuff. I set up a Facebook page where I put some trading stuff up during the week, just different thoughts and stuff. That's that. If you put davidjonestrading.com into your Google browser, it'll take you there. Any questions after this, drop me an email, david.jones@capital.com. Any general trading questions, more than happy to answer them there or on the Facebook page, davidjonestrading.com. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. So Capital.com is where you go to find out more about the platform. Airbnb. Let's have a look at Airbnb. They only came to the market very recently, didn't they? Very recent float. So I think it's always difficult, isn't it, with a recent float? What do you do? We've only got data going back to about 3 months. I don't know. Buy it, I suppose. If I had to do anything, probably buy it. Maybe if we flip it over to a 4-hour chart, buy it with a stop loss under $150, maybe. It's currently trading at 172. But it's been fairly boring, I think, the last 6 weeks or so. Half of its trading life. It's been fairly boring. What mid-cap company would you suggest to watch the next few weeks? No idea. I don't really get that specific, I must admit. TAN Invesco Solar ETF. Let's have a look. Invesco Solar ETF. There it is. Excellent. Thanks for that. It's a good ticker, that, isn't it, TAN? Right. So, track the investment results of the MAC Global Solar Energy Index. It's an interesting one. I was actually looking at an electrical vehicle index today to see how that had performed. So this is another one. So the old clean energy. Great trend. Let's have a look at this one. Great trend since March last year. Looking something like that. Looks a bit like a Tesla share price, actually. We'll have a look at Tesla in a minute. So last year it was $22 a share. Traded up to $120 this year. Coming back. I would be, for me, we're back to the longer term trend. So I think that's a really interesting one. So thanks for letting us know the name of that, after me not being able to find it initially. It's really interesting down here. I suppose if I had to do anything, I'd be a buyer. Clearly nothing today is financial advice, but I'd be a buyer with a stop loss, the closest I'd want my stop. The other side of the December lows are about $79. So the other side of there might be interesting. But it is interesting down here, isn't it? The old solar ETF. I mean, that is absolutely incredible performance, isn't it? Up 6. I mean, that is almost a Tesla move, isn't it? Talking of which, let's have a look at Tesla. Let's have a look at those. They're sort of hovering around, aren't they? That longer term trend, Tesla. It's interesting. It'd be an interesting one. Again, I think it's an interesting one to watch going into next week, Tesla. I mean, 500-ish, 500 to 550 seems to be a base. So we'll see what happens. Are you happy with your Tesla? Yeah, I am. It's an interesting experience to drive them. Yeah, I'm quite happy with mine. They are expensive though. I think I saw as well the prices have gone up again in the last week or so in the US anyway. Can we check nickel? I don't have nickel. I don't think we cover nickel on here. Oh, yes we do. Sorry, I'm talking rubbish. Nickel. We don't have much data though. We must have just added this recently. Don't have much data to go on there, do we? Went from whatever it is, 20,000 down to 15.6. We can't really read too much into there, can we? I think we'd need a bit more data on nickel. I'll try and do a bit of research ahead of next week and see if I can find a longer term chart for the nickel share price. Let me just, the share price, the price of nickel. But really clobber, doesn't it? Let me have a quick look and see if I've got it on my other platform. I've got a feeling I haven't, but I'll take a look just in case. Nickel. No, sorry, I haven't got it. So I'm not too sure on that one, to be honest. Natural gas, blah, 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 blah. Boeing. So look at Boeing. No, it's good to know. Yeah, this has been a really tough month this month for me for trading. I think I said in February, I had my best month ever in February, and March has been just a bit, not a struggle. I've given back. I mean, I've given back profits, obviously, but I've given back about. So I'm trying to think of the profit. About 20% of February's profits in March. It's coming back a bit today, so I'm still be. So if I'd made £1,000 in February, I've given back £200. I've lost £200 in March, for example. So still up overall, but it is. I think because trading is psychological, it's tough, isn't it? It's tough when suddenly you can't do anything wrong, and then suddenly you can't do anything right. But I wonder if it's, hopefully, I think this dollar strength has worked against some of my trades. I mean, the one, we'll come back to Boeing in a minute, that one trade that has been going for a while, sterling yen, has definitely helped my P&L towards the end of the month because it's starting to come back again. I'll tell you what we didn't look at. We didn't look at dollar yen. But it's been but I think that's just the way it is. Unfortunately, it's part of trading life, isn't it? That you have periods. I'm more of a swing trader than a short-term trader. So you will have periods, and for me, it's weeks rather than days where it's not going very well. And then you have a few months where it all goes well, and then you have to give a bit back. But I thought dollar yen was interesting, the move in dollar yen today on that dollar strength. And clearly my sterling yen position has done well as well. Dollar yen back up to June 2020 high. So that's, I think, another interesting market to watch next week. Let's go to Boeing anyway. Let's go and have a look at Boeing. Here we go. So again, clearly they suffered first of all because of the two crashes they had, didn't they, a couple of years back with the planes. And then hit again, of course, because of the lack of air travel last year. It's still recovering. I think it still looks good. We hit fresh recovery highs in March at $280 a share for Boeing. Still looks to be pretty good. I'd rather be a buyer on dips on Boeing back to $200, but for me, I'd be happy to try and ride that trend a bit further and see where it ends up. The price of Boeing. Oh, NIO. Yeah, let's have a look at NIO, the other electric car stock, isn't it? NIO. Here we go. Back to the trend line as well. It's pretty much like Tesla, isn't it? NIO. So I suppose NIO and Tesla will be interesting ones to watch next week, I think, because we're back to the trend. NIO support at $30. And I said I was looking at an ETF for electric cars today, and that there is one. I can't remember what it's called. It's an iShares ETF, and about 4% of it. Here we go. iShares self-driving EV and tech ETF, and I thought it might be because I was thinking about just having a sort of longer-term position in it. 4% of it is Tesla. It's got General Motors and Ford in there as well. I thought it might be interesting, but clearly they've all been a bit under pressure in recent weeks. We've seen that Tesla price come off, but I think NIO is another interesting one to watch next week. Let's see what happens. I'll be expecting a bounce, but the problem is, of course, is how far they moved on the way up. We all know that we are seeing adoption of electric cars, and in the UK from 2030. No petrol cars can be sold, whether that ends up being hybrids or whatever. Anyway, has it overshot, I think, is the question for all these electric car companies. Has it overshot in the short to medium term, the valuations? Who knows? But I think it'd be an interesting week to watch the likes of Tesla and NIO next week. What do I know? Right, that's it. We're going to wrap things up there. I think we're all done. So thanks, as usual, for coming along. I do enjoy doing these, like I always say. I think, I get to look at markets I wouldn't normally look at. That solar power ETF, for example. I think that was an interesting one. But we'll do it all again. It's Easter next week, so it's a holiday in the UK next week on Friday. Probably is a holiday where you are as well. So I'm not sure if we'll do it on Thursday of next week. I'll sort it out on Monday what we're doing. But if you're subscribed with the alarm bell notification pushed on YouTube, you'll get a notification when we're about to go live anyway. So if you do that, even if we do it on Thursday, you'll get to know about it. Go to Capital.com to find out more about the company. Clearly, I do this with Capital.com as their chief market strategist. Go to davidjonestrading.com. I put up market stuff during the week. Drop me an email, david.jones@capital.com for any questions. Follow me on Twitter. Follow Capital.com on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And that's it. Thanks for coming along. Good luck with your trading. It's been a tough month for me. I think it's going to be an interesting week next week, I think. See if this dollar gives back some gains. See if stock markets continue higher. I think oil's interesting. Could see a recovery in oil despite how far it's gone already. But we'll see. We'll see what next week brings, and we'll do it all again, possibly next Thursday. Okay, have a good weekend, and see you next time.